Good morning and welcome to the Path to 100 webinar. Today we are going to talk about a key point to achieve 100% of renewable energy in the power sector, which is the need of flexibility in hydro systems, the case of Brazil. My name is Amaro Pereira. I'm Associate Professor of the Energy Planning Program in the Institute of Graduate Studies in Engineering at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And what is Path to 100%? For those who don't know this initiative, Path to 100 is an objective community intended to bring together top leaders and industry experts to discover solutions, raise awareness, and create a dialogue on how to achieve an operationally and financially realistic approach toward a 100% renewable energy future. One of the main problems to achieve this goal is the intermittent nature of wind and solar power, which challenges the current practice of operations and planning of the grids, as increases the need of flexible and dispatchable power generation. Flexibility turns out to be a key characteristic of future power systems and creates a friendly environment for the deployment of large-scale renewable grids. Understanding the role and the value of such features is important when defining policies and regulations for the procurement of flexibility in the long-term planning. Therefore, in this webinar, the speakers will discuss the role of system flexibility, the transition to 100 renewable energy, what's called flexibility, how flexibility is important in hydro-based countries such as Brazilian reference case, and recommendation for the procurement of flexibility. I'll be the moderator of this webinar, and we invited the three panelists: Gabriel Cavados, Aniela Descalzi, and Gabriel Cunha. Gabriel Cavado is Senior Manager at Wärtsilä Energy Business, and flexibility is the subject of his PhD research, and he is going to share with us his research. Aniela Descalzi is renewable energy consultant. She is expert in solar power plants. She has worked both in private company, both in Brazil and Chile. And she has also worked for the Ministry of Energy in Chile. Gabriel Cunha is project manager at PSR. He is expert in international electricity market, having experience in more than 30 countries. Oh, this webinar will take 50 minutes, and Gabriel will present the agenda now. Gabriel.
Hello, everybody. Oh, I'm sorry. We rehearsed it, and in the end, I did something wrong. That's all right. My name is Gabriel Cavado. It's a pleasure to be here together with my colleagues and with the audience. We put up together here some slides, and the idea is not to discuss over the slides. The slides are just something to raise the subject for us to have a better discussion with Gabriel, Aniela, and you in the audience. So the purpose of the presentation, I divided into two, and just to dig out a little bit on the title of the webinar, need of flexibility in hydro systems, the case of Brazil. So in the first part of the webinar, we will discuss mainly what is flexibility and why does the system needs flexibility. And in the second part, let's discuss, let me present a fun exercise that we did regarding the Brazilian case, which all of you may know is a major hydro system. So it's a perfect match for the webinar here. Moving forward, let me see. if I can. Yeah, there you go. So talking about the need of flexibility, we need to recall the path to 100 that Amaro just told us. So what is the path to 100? As the word even is saying, it's a way for us to achieve a society with 100% renewable energy resources. So this means in practice that in the near future, we will have a system, an energy system, not only power system, but an energy system in general, pretty much dependent on solar and wind, right? So as we can see in the map, and this is a forecast from an international source, we can see that from today until 2050, which is the forecast for the 100% renewable scenario, we can see a lot of yellow stuff and blue stuff, which means a society mainly driven by solar and wind. Of course, we do have other sources still in the grid, biomass, hydro, maybe thermal based on renewable fuels, because that is still possible. But the path to 100 represents mainly a way for us to achieve a renewable society in terms of energy consumption, right? And what are the challenges that this comes with, right? Of course, we all understand the importance of having a renewable energy matrix, but that comes with a price, right? With new challenges that were not part of our thinking in the past. I selected here some references, and these are graphs from Brazil. So let us first take the challenge of wind, right? When you put a lot of wind into your power system, it means that your power system will pretty much be dependent on wind, right? And wind has this special characteristic that it can changes generation on very short periods of time. So the graphs are from the northeast of Brazil, and they are quite updated. It's from May. It's from 2 months ago, and you can see that the wind generation can vary pretty much during the morning. You have ramp downs, ramp ups in very short periods of time. And if you take the graph below, you can see that the same portfolio of generation behaves very differently from date to date. So one thing is that wind varies pretty much during the day, but it's like that during every day. It blows more during the night every day, but that's not actually the true. Of course, on average, we can say something like that, but in real life, it varies pretty much, and it's kind of stochastic. So we cannot foresee, we cannot forecast without with a lot of accuracy. So this means that if you have an energy system pretty much based on wind, you need to address that specific item that wind brings together with it, right? So this is point number one. So let's see about solar now. Solar is a little bit better than wind, as you can see, because we all know that there will be at least a few hours of sun per day. So that is something good, because if we don't get sun at least during few hours per day, we have a bigger problem than energy matrix, right? So sun is good in that direction. We can kind of forecast a little bit more accurate than wind. The problem with sun is that it is concentrated during the day, of course, right? So if we have consumption during the nights or during the morning, then we need either to shift solar from the day to the night, or balance the system with other type of sources in order to guarantee the reliability of the system when the sun is not there. One important comment is that when we have a system pretty much based on renewables, we have to keep in mind that these renewable sources, they are free, right? So it is very important for the operators of the grid to use all renewable sources when they are available. So that's why I put there in both slides that these sources, they are zero marginal cost. So when we have sun, when we have wind, we must take it, otherwise we are wasting cheap energy and making the energy bill more expensive. To sum up here, these two first slides, it's something that we need to start thinking about, right? These sources, they are new, they are dramatically increasing into the power markets, and they bring a special characteristic that were not part of our thinking in the past. So we need to update the way we think, the way we plan the system, and the way we operate in order to get these cheap sources and keep the system working with its characteristics. Moving forward. So this is the point where I try to give you guys what is called flexibility, the meaning of flexibility. I will first explain the graph, and the graph is from the northeast part of Brazil, and we can see exactly the point where wind starts to be installed in the northeast region, and how it changes the matrix dramatically. We can see from the graph, and I know the letters are very small, but we can see that wind is the green one. So when wind enters, wind displaces water from the base load of the system in order to cover this variability. So I will first say that hydro plants, they are very flexible. They add a lot of flexibility into the grid because they can manage, they can start, stop, they can modulate its generation very quickly. So it's kind of a perfect fit for renewable generation. There is a but there that I will mention later, but the meaning of flexibility is exactly that. My daughter taught me once the perfect meaning of flexibility in her mind. She has 5 years, right? And I was making a presentation to the Brazilian system operator a few years ago, and it was during the night, and she wanted to grab my attention, and I needed to finish the presentation. So she asked me, what you're doing, Dad? And then I told her, I'm doing a presentation regarding flexibility, just to try to get her attention off, right? I just wanted to not to give her attention. Maybe she would give up if I told her a subject which is very complicated. But when I said I'm doing a presentation regarding flexibility, she says, you know, my ballet teacher says that we need to be flexible. And then it's the perfect meaning of flexibility, right? So it's something that you can operate maximum as you can, right? You can modulate, you can start, stop, you can put your leg on your shoulder without pain and with minimum cost. So that's what means flexibility into power grid. It means the ability of a power grid to respond to quick variations in generation and demand in a cost optimal way. So this is what means flexibility. So 10 minutes have passed now. These are what we call flexible technologies. So we do have flexible generation, thermal plants, natural gas plants, biogas plants. Energy storage is also a flexible solution. Pumped hydro is a type of energy storage, but a little bit different from the batteries that comes from our mines. So this slide is just to show that there are plenty of technologies that can add flexibility into a grid. So when you add a lot of renewables into a grid, into your system, it means that necessarily you have to address the flexibility issue, and by doing that, you have to think about these technologies and increase their participation in your matrix in order to turn your system into more renewable friendly. You know, your system must be flexible in order to maximize the use of renewables. Just as a sum up of this first session, I hope I could at least address that we are living in an energy transition, meaning wind and solar are the new base load of the systems, they are entering into the power grids, and they are very cheap. So even it's not only environmental friendly, but economically makes sense for you to put a lot of wind and solar into your grid. And that means that you need to increase your ability of the grid to respond to that variations in wind and solar, right? So you need to increase your system flexibility, because flexibility was not a feature from the power grids of the past. Since it was not needed, this feature, it was simply not built. The hydro-based system has an advantage, because the hydro reservoir, the hydro dams, they do add a lot of flexibility into the grid. So this is very valuable, especially for Brazil, and we need to make use of that. And also what I can say here is that the energy sources that are not flexible will lose importance over time. So nuclear, coal, base load generation from fossil sources will be displaced over time with more and more renewables into the grid, because it will come to a point where renewables will compete with fossil generation, and since they are the least cost generation, they will simply displace the fossil generation. So this is the second message, a secondary message for this first part of the presentation. Let's have fun now. Let's talk a little bit about Brazil. And Brazil, as you all know, Brazil is a major hydro system. This is a snapshot from the Brazilian energy system, I would say today. So you can see the pizza there is pretty much blue, and it represents that hydro has a very big participation in the Brazilian energy matrix. We are installing a lot of wind, and starting a few years ago, a lot of solar as well. If I have to, I hate forecasts, but if I have to forecast the near term, I would say that wind and solar, they will simply dominate the new energy auctions that we do in Brazil, simply because they are the least cost generation for energy itself, right? Even though we do have a lot of participation of hydro, the effective generation of hydro, of course, it's pretty much dependent on the rainfall, right? If we have a lot of rain, hydro can have a big participation. If we don't have much rain, the participation is reduced in terms of generation, and we do have to use other sources to complement the hydro-based system. I took the following graph from EPE, which is the Brazilian Energy Planning Officer. We can see that over time, hydro will lose its importance, even though it will remain the major alpha male in the grid. It will lose over time its importance. We can see from the green line here that renewables, they will grow. I have to say that part of this growth is already taking into consideration the past results of auctions. So we do have still a lot of wind and solar to be built, and this trend is almost correct. We can see thermal in the red line, and this is, I will call regular thermal, which is the thermal that EPE procures for the hydro balance, or in order to be dispatched for periods of months or even years, in order to save water in the dams. So this is another type of system flexibility given by, I will say, base load thermal. And we do have a new feature that EPE is taking into consideration, which is alternativa ponta, which means peaking alternative. And it's exactly this type of peaking alternative that we are trying to address to you guys, that the hydro systems, they will need. So EPE kind of already realizes that the system needs more flexibility, and probably we will need to procure flexibility in order to have the system more friendly for renewables deployment. Moving forward. now I will just share with you. I have 5 minutes to share with you some results of a modeling that we did using a software that can model a power grid in the future. So we took the Brazilian premises and we put in a software where we can run a long-term planning, meaning what would be the long-term expansion of the system, and also taking the future to 2027, how that system would operate considering all of those type of flexible technologies that we mentioned to you. So let me go through the results of this exercise here. I promise not to take much of your time. So this is the result of the LT model. It's pretty much aligned with the results that EPE concluded. So we do have a lot of renewables being installed because they are simply the cheapest ones. So the model selects the cheapest energy sources in order to build the expansion in megawatt hours. We do have some baseload gas, and I have to make a comment here. This baseload gas is mainly driven by a restriction that we put into the model to restrict the amount of renewables. And very cheap gas. So this is something important when taking into consideration the future. Base load still has its limited role, but only if we limit the renewable expansion. So renewables, they are so cheap that if we don't restrict their amount into the grids, the model will select it and expand it pretty much. There is no much hydro or biomass being installed, simply because we took that premise from EPE, and there are not much bigger hydros to be installed. And the software also concludes that the system needs roughly 10 to 12 gigawatts of flexibility, I would say, of flexible technology to be installed in order for you to cover variations in wind, solar, and water. Moving forward, so this I already mentioned to you. This is just a summary of what I just explained in the previous slide. I decided to write it here just for reference of the audience. I will jump directly to the dispatch model that we did. So we took the matrix from the model, and we run a simulation on how that system would operate in reality. So we have 8,760 hours during the year. We have 6 hydro scenarios: dry, 2 average, and 2 wet. And let's see how especially this flexible technology behaves into the power grid, and you will see how flexibility is important even in hydro systems. So that's the point of showing to you the results of these simulations, right? These are the flexible technologies that we are taking into consideration. So we have one scenario with no flexibility at all, just for you to see how the costs of the systems are very high if you don't add flexibility, mainly because you ended up with blackouts because of this variation. We have one scenario with rice, and it's not the food, it's reciprocating internal combustion engine. We have 2 scenarios with gas turbines, one with aeroderivative and another one with heavy duty. We do have 2 other scenarios, one for battery storage and another one for pumped hydro. So let's jump into the results. I have just a few minutes. So these are results, and going from the left to the right. So the first graph is the total costs of operating the system in 2027, considering each type of flexibility option that I gave in the previous slide. You can see that with no flexibility added at all, so with no flexibility being procured by the system operator, the costs are very high. And you can see that there is a cost of unserved energy that plays an important role there. We can see 3 technologies that are behaving better for that grid. Those are reciprocating engines and both gas turbines. So these kinds of makes in our minds that very soon we will need to procure flexible power plants in order to deal with intermittency from wind and solar, because the grid can benefit from that installation. And we can see as well that battery storage and pump hydro, they are still not that close in terms of bringing value to the system operator. We know that these least technologies, they are still evolving, right? So it can be that in the near future they can compete hand to hand with the thermal options that we just described here. It's just that with the premises that we used, they are still not competitive. I have two other graphs, one with unserved energy. So the grid with the flexible plants installed, they are able to keep the reliability of the grid, so there is no unserved energy at all. And also, just for reference from the audience, we do have a scenario with carbon emissions from the grid, and you can see that even if you include thermal flexibility, natural gas flexible plants into the grid, the emissions are lower. And this is simply because with no flexibility at all, you have to dispatch your current plants into the grid in a non-optimal way. And this means more emission from the current power plants that are installed into the grid. Moving forward, just for reference, I am approaching the end of the presentation here. We took just for as curiosity and for us to discuss it later, how would these flexible technologies be operated by ONS, which is the system operator. So you can see that during wet years and average years, the flexible natural gas plants, they would operate mainly on the peaking time. So these are a week from September, and this was especially selected because the ones that are from Brazil know that September is the month where we still have a lot of wind, and the hydro reservoirs, they are very low. So there is very limited amount of flexibility from the hydros. And you can see that the natural gas plants, they still plays an important role. During the wet year is very minimal. During the average year is minimum, but it's still relevant. But during the dry year, the thermal plants, they can support the reliability of the grid, and this means that they are not only supplying flexibility for wind and solar, but they are supplying flexibility to the hydro plants as well. The point of putting these slides here is we do have the hydro systems do have a lot of flexibility from the hydro plants, but that flexibility is not there all the time. It's subject to rainfall. So that's the point here of showing to you this dispatch profile, and that's the role of flexible plants. You don't install them to use them. You install them in case you need to use them, and I think that's the real point. So this is just to show you the capacity factor of and the number of starts and stops per year. So you can see that during dry years, the dispatch profile is quite significant, but it reduces dramatically if you get good rainfall. But the amount of starts and stops, they don't vary pretty much. So even though you do have wet years and you don't need to dispatch pretty much of these flexible plants, you may need to start and stop them for short periods of time in order to comply with the reliability of the grid. And this is an important factor because this can be a huge cost for the system. Some technologies, they do have a lot of start and stop costs. So we need to take that specific parameter into consideration when procuring future flexible plants for our grid. I'm sorry. So this is the last slide now. Just to sum up, this was already said, but in item number 3, these are the suggestions. So what we are suggesting here is that flexibility should be a feature to be procured separately from energy. So in order to keep reliability and the operational costs of the grid down, we need to procure flexibility and increase the flexibility from the grid. It must be procured on system level, because this is something that all agencies of the system will benefit from. And it's important to take into consideration all of these scenarios, all of these uncertainties from the future, not only for the intermittent generation, but also from the hydro. Because if a dry year happens, and they happen quite often, we need to have competitive and cheap flexible generation in order to keep the costs of the system down. So Amaro, I exceeded my time in 6 minutes. I'm sorry, but that's the message that I would like to start with.
Thank you for this inspiring presentation, Gabriel. So, besides the ability of dancing ballet, according to Gabriel, the concept of flexibility is the ability to respond quickly to the fluctuation on the demand. Aniela, do you think we can include some elements in this concept, or so that we can improve the concept?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thanks for your question, and congrats, Gabriel, for your fantastic presentation. I think you include everything, and it's been difficult to contribute with more points. But regarding to your question, Amaro, I think that the official definition of flexibility is extremely open. I think that we talk about flexibility, and as Gabriel noted in the presentation, we have to talk about flexible generation, we have to talk about transmission, ancillary services, topology of the system in regards to the geographical flexibility, and also the temporary flexibility, okay? Especially in Brazil, because the interconnected system here is very complex, and you have different flexibility in the northeast subsystems with a low demand and a lot of wind and solar power, and also another flexibility in the southeast subsystem with a I don't know, maybe 65% of the demand of the country, okay? Also, you have to consider the technical and flexible parameters of the coal generators, for example, minimum technicals, optimal operation, demand, and my favorite topic, the international interconnection, but that is regarding to the technical part, okay? So what about the regulation? I think that flexibility, technical flexibility, okay, we are agreed and in the same line with Gabriel, but also we need flexibility in regulation, okay? Because we are having a lot of technological progress, okay? But change one regulatory measure can take 4, 5, or 10 years. So what about the flexibility on regulation? And I think Gabriel Cunha is going to talk about this later, okay? Well, I think we don't have enough time. I would like to talk about batteries, but I will not. I would like to mention something very special for me, because it's in my country, in Chile. And thank you very much, Guilherme de Souza and Rafael Carvalho for updating me with this information. Last month, one solar farm, Luz del Norte, was the first utility-scale solar farm in the world to bring ancillary services such as AGC, automatic generation control, remunerated and commercially into the Chilean system. So it is a very good example of a well-designed solar farm can bring flexibility into the grid, and first solar demonstrated this. That's it.
Thank you, Aniela. So Gabriel Cunha, she raised a very important point, which is for the procurement of flexibility, we need a specific regulation. How is this discussion in Brazil? Do you think the regulation is improving so that we can incorporate this kind of procurement?
Perfect, Amaro. Actually, this is something very relevant. As Aniela was saying, this even in the world there isn't a lot of consensus. A lot of regulators and electricity systems in general are still fumbling a little bit and trying to converge on a few things. And even some countries have made slightly different definitions of what is flexibility, what kind of flexibility products need to be procured. And in Brazil, we are really at an important crossroads because of the effort of modernizing the Brazilian electricity sector. We are in the middle of a process of introducing hourly prices, for example, and within this representation of more detailed hourly and sub-hourly effects, it becomes important to take into account some of the technical limitations of the system. But that's just the first step, right? As we move forward, we are certainly going to find important differences, and the fact is that with regards to flexibility specifically, the representation of the reserves in the Brazilian system is very simplified. We simply rely on hydropower plants to deliver whatever is needed. There are some 6 different reserve products and a very limited subset of reservoir hydro plants that are required to deliver those, and the regulated payment associated with it. So there isn't any kind of competition nor any kind of incentive for any players outside of those 20 hydropower plants to deliver anything. And right now, this is extremely cheap for Brazil. So I took, along with the help of some of my colleagues in PSR, we listed the total amount of paid. That there isn't a representation on how much is actually needed of reserves, but if we assume that it's 5% of the peak load, for example, of Brazil, then we pay less than 3 cents per 3 cents of reais per megawatt hour, so less than one cent of dollar per megawatt per hour of reserves. So it is really not something that that lends itself to creating strong incentives, and that creates questionings from what may happen in the future as reservoir hydro represent less and less percentage-wise of the system, and as we have more challenges with possibly constraints and possibly renewables. And as Aniela was saying, it's important to not to underestimate how much flexibility different sources can deliver, right? So we have the solar power plants, as Aniela said. If we do some arrangement with the inverters, it is possible for them to provide automatic generation control. And even though hydropower is the gold standard of how you can do flexibility, certainly, and Brazil is very used to having access to those, it is important to continue researching and even run-of-river hydropower plants and thermal power plants. If they have the correct incentives, they can certainly seek out to deliver the flexibility that the system needs. And if you allow me just 30 seconds of a parenthesis, because this is extremely valuable, the kind of work that Gabriel Cavados has been doing, and actually doing the math and actually putting numbers into things. We can make discussions in a qualitative manner. You know, everything is important, etc., etc. But this is what I was saying, that we can't underestimate how much different the system can adapt, and how much different sources can contribute, and how much even the demand for flexibility of the system needs to be thought in this context of plasticity, you know, on how consumers can respond, and and demand side and distributed generation and distributed energy resources in general can really play an important role. And so this is something that very valuable that Gabriel Cavados has been working on, and that in PSR, my own company, we have been doing a lot. We have our own software and that we develop and that we use for this kind of work, and we have a consultancy side where we actually run the software and we examine that. So there are a lot of interesting questions that hopefully we can continue to discuss within this the context of this chat, a round table after the presentation. But just to give this mention that I think really doing the math is important and gives a lot of useful insights that are certainly going to have implications for the regulation.
Thank you, Gabriel. Before opening for the audience for questions, I would like Gabriel to make some comments on the Aniela and Gabriel Cunha's talk.
Yeah, I mean, perfect comments. Maybe if I can add something more to what you said. Of course, we did a study here with very limited amount of flexible technologies, and I do understand that, for example, on system level, there are other ways for you to increase system flexibility. For example, you spread renewable generation, and then you can have the portfolio effect, and then you reduce the need of system flexibility. You can increase interconnection between regions, and by doing that, you add flexibility to your grid. But also, one important thing maybe is that just getting something from what Gabriel Cunha said. We need to consider flexibility as well when we procure energy for the grid. For example, when we procure wind and solar, we need to take into consideration the times of the day where they generate, because a correlation between these two sources may reduce the need of system flexibility. So, I mean, it's not only to procure flexibility on a system level, you have to consider it when expanding the energy for your grid, because, for example, the Brazilian ICB, Índice Custo-Benefício, and the international one, LCOI, Levelized Cost of Energy, they fail exactly to measure the value of the energy on the short period of time, and this needs to be updated as well, because by doing that, you can actually reduce the need of system flexibility. This may be another idea for us to further discuss here in Brazil, you know. But that's the major comments that I have. I agree with both Aniela and Gabriel with their other comments. I just wanted to add something more.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. So now we can open for questions. We will take as many as possible. We have 10 minutes for this Q&A session. So I have a first question for Gabriel Cavados. Why does the scenario DT Aero 13 gigawatts have more emission than the RISE 13 gigawatts?
Because, I mean, the audience is probably going directly to the fact that the gas turbine emits less CO2 than the reciprocating engine. But we need to consider also the dispatch profile of that generation. So we don't control in the model, and we do not put a restriction whether to dispatch each thermal generation in its optimal way, right? So it may be the case that the model is dispatching part of this aeroderivative portfolio on less than 100% load, and this means that, for example, the emissions of that specific technology rises. When we do with reciprocating engines, you have more modularity. You know, you can dispatch 10 megawatts units, for example, in an optimal way. So you don't I will call it derate the emissions, but this may be one of the explanations. But the point is, if we take the emission from the equipment itself, the guy or the lady that make the question has a point there. In the equipment itself, the gas turbine has lower emissions than a reciprocating engine, but that doesn't mean that when operating into the grid, it will represent less emission. We need to take into consideration how that equipment will be used by the system operator. This is a great point, actually.
Yeah, thank you, Gabriel. There is another question is for all of you, and I just want to make some comments about that before ask the question itself. That the best way to store energy and to have flexibility is with the hydropower plant reservoir. And as Brazil is in a tropical area, so we can take the advantage of this different seasonality. So we have a good complementarity once we have an interlinked system. So we can improve this complementarity if we make an integration with other countries in South America. What do you think about the advantage of this integration? So we can now start from Gabriel Cunha, just to change the order.
No, all integrations are extremely valuable, and I think, as I was saying, we can't really underestimate any of the technologies, but the portfolio is always pretty much better than any of them individually. And so, as Gabriel was saying, even integration between regions and international integration play a key role in allowing the ensemble to work in a better way. And so this would be perhaps one of the key takeaways of this kind of thing. So I think, for example, in Gabriel's work, we looked into an attempt to compare the core of each technology, right? So we had essentially 13 gigawatts of several alternatives in order to highlight the difference between them. But most likely what would be the solution would be sort of all of the above, 1 gigawatt of each, plus flexibility, plus integration, plus batteries. And Aniela mentioned that this is something that's also very relevant, that in Brazil we don't talk a lot about batteries. I mean, even in EPE, in the expansion plan from 2019, already has quite a bit of discussions on batteries. I mean, we are still further away from needing batteries compared to some other countries, due to the role that the hydropower plants and even smaller reservoirs, such as those from run-of-river hydro, have in the sense of allowing displacement of energy across time, right? So this is a service that is extremely valuable, that many countries don't have any services other than batteries to rely on to provide that, whereas we still have hydropower to a certain extent. But even here in Brazil, batteries are still increasing in importance, right? So I'm just giving several examples, just to highlight the fact on how building a portfolio and having several different elements is important and valuable from a system flexibility point of view.
Thank you. Aniela?
Yeah, I'm in line with Gabriel, but talking about the regional interconnection and the natural resources we have in radiation or global horizontal irradiation in Chile, wind power in Argentina, in the south of Argentina, wind power in the northeast of Brazil, and also hydropower between Brazil and Bolivia. It's clear that we have a very complementary natural resources, and I think that economically and technically the regional interconnection is feasible. Okay, the problem of our region is not technical. It's not about the natural resources, or it's not about the transmission in infrastructure. I think that the challenge for a region is more, we don't have a strong institutionality, regional institutionality. I think the Mercosur or UNASUR or past initiatives or supranational institutions are not strong enough in order to arbitrate or solve controversies regarding to the bilateral or multilateral agreements, especially in energy, because we have scarce and frustrated initiatives in the past, such as the situation of the gas between Brazil and Bolivia, for example, in the year 2005 or 4, when Evo Morales became president of Bolivia, and also the gas crisis in Chile because of the transfer of gas from Argentina in the year 2004, I think so. And I think the challenge of the regional interconnection is clear, is political, geopolitical, and regulatory also, because all the countries has different regulations. So the harmonization of the regulation of all the countries is a huge challenge, but also a very good opportunity, because the regulation in Chile is more mature in flexibility, for example, than Brazil. And Brazil has a commercialization market since 15 years ago, and Chile still doesn't start with this. And also Peru are with a lot of barriers with the renewable energies, so the capacity of renewable energies in Peru is low. So I think the harmonization of the regulation in the region is a very good opportunity, and I'm pretty sure that the interconnection in the region will bring us a lot of benefits, and I think we have to start to talk about this and in the planification institutions. And that's it.
Thank you, Aniela. No, let's skip for another question, because we are running out the time. So just one other question here. Given the importance of having flexibility to guarantee the supply of the system with the insertion of renewable, shouldn't it be considered as a factor when contracting energy in regulation markets? Besides flexibility, which other aspects should be considered too? So I think Gabriel can start answering this question. Gabriel Cavados.
No, I fully agree with the understanding that we need to have different products to be procured for energy markets, not only energy itself. So the idea of procuring, for example, energy split from flexibility is exactly for you to have the cheapest possible energy supply with the maximum reliability for your grid. So and today, since wind and solar are the cheapest one, you get renewable as well. So you get cheap and renewable, and you get system reliability, and that makes your power system works on an optimal way. So I do think that we need to split these two products and procure them separately. But also, again, I guess that I mentioned this during the last question. When procuring energy for itself, it's important for you to consider flexibility as well. Not that these sources will supply it, but they can, working together, reduce the need of flexibility. That's what I have to comment, Amaro.
Thank you, Gabriel. So we ran out of time, so I will do a quick sum up of what we have discussed here. So we saw that the massive introduction of wind and solar power can be a headache, not only for the system operator, but also for the expansion planning due to their intermittent nature. So provide system flexibility is a key point to overcome these challenges. System flexibility goes beyond the concept of ability to respond to quickly fluctuations in the demand. So we have to consider other possibilities like ancillary services, like the transmission, distribution, as Aniela said. So in system which relies on hydropower plant like Brazil, the reservoir provides this flexibility. However, the reduction of the regularization capacity in Brazil indicates that we will need more flexibility, and the integration with other countries in South America will be very, very important for that, as well as other technology, for example, batteries. And also we have to improve our regulation so that we can take this opportunity coming from new technology like batteries or other flexible thermal power plants like Gabriel Cavado showed us. So this is the end of our webinar. Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you very much for the panelists. So bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Path to 100. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Amaro. Thank you, Gabriel.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you, guys, for the participation. Bye.